Hey everyone, Kevin from MechanicalAdvantage.com. In part one of this video series, you saw me take an M-LOK 125 Duo vise, add the soft jaws, joint origins, draw the component, and place the instances of the component where they need to go inside of the jaws. I'll put a link to that video down below in the comments. In this video, what I'm going to do is continue the process of setting up the soft jaws and adding the cam toolpaths. We're ready to go out and machine this on the Sile X7. Before I do that, I want to hop out to my website really quick and let you guys know about some classes that are coming up. If you come out to MechanicalAdvantage.com and you click on the training heading, you'll see some class offerings. The two I want to focus on today are the Fusion 360 Lathe class and the Fusion 360 Mill Fundamentals. The Lathe class is 2 4-hour sessions that cover everything you need to get started with programming a lathe using Fusion. And the Mill Fundamentals is 4 4-hour sessions to get you started in programming mill toolpaths inside of Fusion. The Mill class is going to cover everything from 2D to 3D surfacing to patterns to tool libraries. Pretty much is a start to end process to get you up to speed very quickly, getting started with milling parts inside of Fusion 360. Go ahead and hop out there, take a look at the dates if you're interested. And I'm also curious if you guys would like me to add evening class options, or class options that would be more conducive to those of you that are in more of an international time zone. So if you're interested in anything like that, please let me know that in the comments below, or you can also send me an email to kevin@MechanicalAdvantage.com. Also remember, if you want to work one-on-one with me, you can come out here and click on the schedule now button and figure out a way that we can work together to help you with your project. I'm going to hop back over into Fusion and we're going to continue the process. So what I want to do in this video is create the soft jaw pockets and the toolpaths. One thing we need to know is the type of stock I'm using for this job. So this part is 1.25 inches in diameter, and the stock that I'm going to be using is 1.375 inches in diameter. The part is 2.25 inches tall, and I've cut the stock to be 2.375 inches long so that it's just slightly longer than what the part is. So the first thing I need to do is cut out my soft jaw pockets. Now, where you want to put your sketches and features for this is kind of a personal preference. You could certainly put them inside of the M-LOK 125 and activate, different things in there to keep it more organized. Generally, what I do when I'm doing this kind of prep work is I just do it at the main design level, and then I just know that those sketches and features are related to the cam toolpathing that I want to do. So I'm going to start out by creating a new sketch, and I'm going to put this new sketch on the bottom face of this part. Now, as I said, remember the part is 2.25 inches tall and my stock is 2.375 inches tall. So I want to put a little bit of gap between the stock and the actual part. So you'll see how I do that in a second. I'm going to make that construction. I just drew a window around that and made a construction so that now when I come and I draw a circle at the origin, I can type in my diameter 1.375. and then I can finish my sketch and I'm ready to make my cut in my soft jaws. I'm gonna start my extrude, and because there's only one close profile, Fusion automatically finds it. And in this case, I wanna go 2 directions because I wanna account for that extra 1/16 of an inch that I wanna put below this part. So for the direction, I'm gonna go 2 sides. I'm gonna go down 0.0625, and then I'm gonna come up, and then for that second distance, I'm gonna go all the way through. I don't want this to be a new body. I want this to be a cut. And when I do that, you see the red preview that I get. Now, one little problem is it's going to cut my part away at the same time, and I don't want that to happen. So I have a couple options on how I could deal with that. I could turn off the part and then it won't participate. My other option is under the objects to cut. I don't want it to cut my gauge component. So when I uncheck that and it's set to cut and I hit OK, now if I turn off that first part, I have my cavity that I need. And if I go and I look, I've got my 1/16 of an inch spacing from the bottom of the part to the bottom of that pocket that I need to account with that extra stock. So that takes care of creating the cavity for the first set of soft jaws. For the second set of soft jaws, I'm gonna do it slightly different. I'm gonna go to the modify menu and choose combine. And I have to choose my target body first and then my tool body, and what kind of an operation I want to do. I want to do a cut here. And it's very important to check this box called Keep Tools. Otherwise, your part disappears once you hit OK. So I'll hit OK. It doesn't really look like anything happened. I have to repeat that one more time. I'm going to do it from the command I have in the toolbar this time. So I'm going to select the jaw I want to be the target. the tool body that I want to do the subtracting. I want to do a cut and I want to keep the tools, and I'll hit OK. And now if I shut off the second instance, I've created my soft jaw cavity that matches when I flip this part over. Last thing I want to do is when I am going to mill this, I realize there's going to be a gap and there's two jaws. I'm going to treat my stock as if it's one piece of stock that encompasses both soft jaws. And so it's going to be easier for me to treat these different areas as one object rather than two. So I'm going to create a few sketches here. I'm going to create a sketch on this face. I'm going to make this construction again. And then I'm just going to draw a circle from the origin, drag it out, and then I'll just set it equal. Now, I really didn't need to make that construction for what I'm doing, just kind of a habit of stuff that I do. So I'm going to create another sketch on the next level. And this time I won't make a construction just so you can see it works both ways. Just drag it out. And then I'm going to say equal constraint between here and here. And I'll, I did the wrong one. So I'm just going to Control Z that. I'm going to do the equal constraint between this edge and that edge. Okay, so there's my proper edge. And then I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to create a sketch on this face. And then I'm going to draw one more circle, drag it out, add my equal constraint between those two. Finish my sketch and rotate around. Now you can see that I can easily click on these circles for my boundaries for the toolpaths I want to use for that second set of soft jaws. So that wraps me up with the prep that I need for creating the soft jaw cavities. Now I'm ready to go through and start doing my toolpathing on this. So I'm going to go to my workspaces and I'm going to switch to the manufacturer workspace, and I can do a little bit of prep ahead of time. I'm going to go to my models, expand out my design, and I want to turn off both instances of the gauge. I don't need to see either one of the gauge components, and I'm ready to make a new setup. As I make the new setup, Fusion isn't quite sure what it is that I want to machine, and keep in mind what we want to machine here is just the soft jaws. So I'm going to start out by selecting that by going to the model and clicking on the two soft jaws that I want to machine. And then I'm going to click on the white dot here, and I'm going to choose that location out in that spot. The reason I chose that is I have to think about how this vise is set up. On this vise, this jaw gets fixed and this jaw gets fixed. So this is the non-moving part, and that's where I want to set my work coordinate system. When I create the other setup, I'm going to create the work coordinate system on this location because this is the fixed or non-moving jaw. I'm ready to move over to the stock tab, and I'm going to do a fixed size box, and I'm going to choose my round up to nearest to be 0, set that to be 0. And now the size of my stock and the size of my two soft jaws are exactly the same size. One final change that I want to make is on the post process tab. I'm going to enter 1 in the work coordinate system offset to give me a G54, and now I can hit OK. So I'll call this front soft jaws, and that'll be my first setup. I'm going to repeat the process, create another setup for the back set of soft jaws. So for this, I want to tell it what I want to machine, which is going to be these two components. On the stock, I'm going to choose fixed size box again. And then for the location, if I come back here, the location, I'll click on the white dot and then the other white dot. That's where I want to put this work coordinate system for G55. And on the stock, what I should have done when I was there is set my round to nearest to be 0 again. So it's going to be a fixed size box with the exact same size as the two soft jaws. And for the post process tab, I'm going to set this to be 2, which will give me a G55. So I've got my G54 set to this corner and my G55 set to that corner, and I'll hit OK. And now I have my setups complete, and I'm ready to start adding toolpaths for the different soft jaw cavities. Before I do that, I'm going to rename my setup to be rear soft jaws. And I'm going to activate front soft jaws now because I want to do this pocket in the front. And just like the first time, I know I want to use the sketch that I created for this. So I'm going to go to my sketches folder, and I'm going to turn on my very first sketch so that I can work with that. To start with, I'm going to go and I'm going to do a 2D adaptive clearing. And I'm going to go to my tool library, and I'll find my Sile X7 Alumina library. And inside of here, I want to grab tool number 3, which is a 3/8 inch 3-flute end mill. For my geometry, I'm going to select that sketch circle. And here you can see, generally Fusion does a really good job when you're working with solids. When you're working with 2D surfaces, there's no real way for it to figure out what side you want to be on. So I'll just click on that red arrow to get it on the inside. And then I'm going to go to my heights. It's cutting from the stock top, which is great. but it's going down to the selected contours, which isn't great. Because remember, when I drew this, I drew it on the bottom of the part, and then I added a 1/16 of an inch offset. So what I really need to do is go down to a selection instead, not selected contours, but a selection. And here you can see with that sketch on, Fusion is really blocking me from trying to grab the surface that I want. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna long press and hold until I see this menu come up, and now I can just cycle through until I find the face that I want. And now I can select that even though the sketch is kind of preventing me from grabbing what I want there. I'm gonna go over to the passes. My optimal load, if I right click and edit the expression, is set to be 0.4. I want that to be actually I'm gonna go 0.15 on this. 15% of the tool diameter for my step over. And I'll hit OK, and we'll go through, and I'm gonna leave 0.01 on the walls, and I'm not gonna leave anything on the floor. I'm just gonna set that to 0. Really not that critical of a thing for this. I'm gonna go over to my linking tab, and the only real change I'm gonna make is if I were to hit OK now, the tool is going to helix in. In fact, let me just do it and show what's gonna happen. So as the tool makes its entry, it's gonna helix in. But remember, when I created my soft jaw, I put a 3/8 inch gap between the two faces, and I'm using a 3/8 inch cutter, so I can drop that cutter right between those two soft jaw faces. So I'm gonna edit this, and on the linking tab, I'm gonna specify a pre-drill position of this edge. Now that white dot shows up, and when I hit OK now, it just plunges down between those two soft jaw faces, and I'm not gonna collide with anything. So if I want, I could simulate this to make sure everything's okay. And you can see it looks like it's plunging through the stock. Remember, there is nothing in the middle. I have to make sure I get my tool stuck out far enough. In this case, it is. I can maybe make this go a little bit faster. And there I get my 2D adaptive toolpath that cleans out the bore. Now I want to pretty much do the same thing with the 2D contour, and rather than doing that from scratch, I'm going to right click on the 2D adaptive. I'm going to create a derived operation, 2D milling, and 2D contour. That's going to make a copy of the operation but change it from an adaptive to a contour. I'll go to my geometry. Everything looks okay. My heights, everything is the exact same because it's a copy. My passes, I want to make sure that my stock to leave isn't on, and it's not. So only a couple things I'm going to change here. I'm going to choose to repeat the finishing pass so it makes a finishing pass a spring pass. And I'm going to put a value of 0.08 for the finishing overlap. So it's going to start and then it's going to go past where it started again. And then on the linking tab, I'm going to uncheck the entry position because this time I don't need to ramp into the center. And in fact, the pre-drill position. And in fact, if I do that, it'll probably throw an error and complain about it. So I think I'm happy with that. I'll hit OK. And there we get a 2D contour toolpath that cleans up the walls. Now I'm done with this sketch, so I'm gonna turn this off. I can't recommend you do that enough. When you're working in the cam, if you're not actively working with a sketch, turn its visibility off. Fusion wants to prioritize selecting sketches over model geometry. And I can't tell you the number of times I've worked with customers where they get frustrated because Fusion isn't doing what they want and they didn't realize that they had a sketch on, and Fusion is trying to choose that underlying sketch instead of the solid model faces. So that will wrap up doing the soft jaw work for the first set of soft jaws. I'm now gonna activate my rear soft jaws, and I'm gonna use a lot of these same strategies over again. So I'm just gonna copy these two toolpaths, right click and say copy, go to my rear soft jaws, and I'm gonna paste these in. And now I'll just go and edit the first adaptive operation. And I want to go turn on some of my sketches. So I'm going to start with that sketch first. Go to my geometry. I'm going to clear my selection and choose that 2D profile. This time it got the right profile that I want. On the heights, it's going to go from the stock top. I'm going to choose it to be the selected contours for this operation. On the passes tab, everything else should be good. I'm leaving 10 thousandths and nothing. And I do want to do my pre-drill position. So I'm just going to reselect the edge that I want over here. And now I can hit OK. And there's my adaptive operation that cleans that up. I'm going to edit my 2D contour, go to my geometry, throw away my chain, and reselect the chain of geometry that I want to machine in this case. And that should be the only change I need to make. I'll hit OK. And I do need to make a change on the heights because it was set to selection. So on the heights, I'm just going to change it to be selected contours again, and now I can hit OK. And that's going to take care of that error for us. So I'm good on the first step. I'm just going to copy this adaptive and I'll paste it. And now I'm going to edit the adaptive. I'm going to turn off that sketch and turn on the other sketch. Go to my geometry, clear my selection, grab the new chain. That's good. My height should be good in this case. Even my pre-drill position will be okay now. So I can go ahead and hit OK. And that does my second. I'm going to copy my 2D contour, paste it back in. I'm going to edit the 2D contour, go to my geometry, throw away my chain, and again, I'll select the chain that I want. And this time I can hit OK because I have selected contour as the height where I didn't have that the first time. So I'll just right click on both of these and say copy, and I'm going to right click and paste them both at the same time. And now I can edit the adaptive. I'm going to turn the sketch off and go down to the sketch that I need, go to the geometry, throw away my selection, grab the edge that I want, make sure it's previewing properly. On the heights, I'm just checking to make sure it's selected contours, and it is. On the linking, the pre-drill position will be the same again, which will be that point. So I can hit OK, and that's going to rough out that last section. And then I will just edit my 2D contour, geometry, throw in my chain, reselect the chain that I want. I can hit OK, and that does my 2D contour, finish up the rear soft jaw. If I want, I can do a quick simulation to make sure. I really recommend that you always do a simulation to make sure that there are no collisions. We're going to get a little bit of a clearance issue here. So if I look at this, let's do that again, but let's jump forward. We're going to see that we're going to get awful close on the next operation down. So that's a little closer for comfort than I'd like to be. So before I run this, I'm going to adjust the tool stick out on this part. And I think I'll do that after we finish up all our tool paths to make sure everything is okay. So it looks like it's gonna be okay. I would have clearance if I absolutely had to do this, it would be okay. I just like to give myself a little bit more room. So I'll hit close. I'll go to my home tab, and now I can go ahead and save my file. And I'm going to turn that sketch back off and just minimize my setups. I guess I can expand out my models, and I can turn on my two components here because that's what I'm going to need to work on next. So I'll need to create a setup for the first component that I'm going to work on. I'll create a setup, and I'm going to say the model that I want to work on is going to be that. And then for the stock, I'm going to choose a fixed size cylinder. And I can enter in my values about that. Now, before I do anything, I'm gonna go to my roundup to nearest. I'm gonna set this to be 0, and then I'm gonna right click and just make that my default so that I don't always have to keep going back and changing that. The stock diameter is gonna be 1.375, and the total length is going to be 2.375. I do want that to be centered. So if I did everything right, you can see the stock is sitting down there in the bottom of the cavity, and I still have material above the part to clean back up. So that'll be perfect. I'm gonna go over to my passes tab, and on my work coordinate system, I'm gonna set this to be 1, which is the G54, and I almost critically forgot something. I need to change my work coordinate system to be that same point. Now, under the origin, it's looking for a stock box point, and I can only select one of the points that are currently on the stock. What I want to do is go to the origin and choose selected point and make sure I select that same point that I used in the previous setup. And once I have that done, I can hit OK, and that completes my setup. Now, before I move on, I'm going to rename this setup to be front gauge and hit enter so I know what I'm working on. And I'm ready to start adding toolpaths. I'm going to start out by doing a 3D adaptive clearing. And I'm going to grab out of my Sile X7 aluminum library, I'm going to grab my tool number 2. It's a shear hog. So it's an 1.25" diameter shear hog 3 flute. And for the geometry, I'm going to let Fusion figure out everything inside of that yellow box to machine away. But for the heights, I'm going to make a small change. I'm going to go from the stock top to the model top for this one. And then on the passes, I'm going to increase the optimal load up to be 0.5. Again, this cutter is 1.25" in diameter. I'm only taking off a 1/16 of an inch, so that shouldn't be any problem whatsoever. And I want to go down and make one more change. I want to turn on flatter detection. I'm going to turn on order by area, though it probably won't matter on this part. I'm going to set my radial stock to leave to be -0.1. And for my axial stock to leave, I'm going to set that to be a +0.01. I'm doing -0.1 here because I want to cut a bigger area than what the stock is. And I'm doing a positive because I want to come back with a facing pass after that. On the linking tab, I don't think I'm going to need to make any changes here. So I'll hit OK and see what toolpath I get. And you see I just get a toolpath that just removes the top bit of surface off of there. And now with that gone, I'm going to do a 2D facing operation with the same tool. But for this time, for the geometry, the stock selection is just going to be that. On the passes, I'm going to add a pass extension of 0.75 inches. And on the linking tab, I want the tool to extend all the way off of the stock before it retracts. And I'll hit OK. and that should give me the toolpath I'm looking for right there. So the first toolpath just kind of took care of the excess. The second toolpath gave me a nice surface finish up on top. And now I can go back up onto my softjaws operation, and I can start copying some of these toolpaths. So I'm gonna grab this adaptive, and I will say copy, and I'm just gonna right click and choose paste. And now I can just edit this, go to my geometry. I'm gonna throw my chain of geometry away and select the chain that I do want. So I'll start with that height. I could probably go right down to here right away. I'm gonna take this in a couple steps. On my heights tab, I'm gonna go from the model top in this case to the selected contours. And when I think about it now, it's not gonna do multiple depths unless I tell it to. So stock top would have been just fine here as well. On the passes tab, same optimal load, 15% of the cutter, so that'll be fine. I'm gonna leave 10 thousandths radially. I also wanna leave 10 thousandths axially. I wanna leave some material to come back and clean up. So that's all good. And then on the linking tab, I don't want a pre-drill position anymore. That was copied over from the last one. So I'm gonna hit okay and see what I get for a result here. And that looks just fine. It's gonna go through and clear out that material. I can go find one of my 2D contours from up here and copy it. So I'm gonna copy that, right click and say paste. And now I can just edit that 2D contour, go to my geometry, throw it away, apply it to the edge that I want it to be applied to. Shouldn't have any other choices I need to make. I'll hit okay and I'll just visually check that to make sure everything is all right. Now, one thing I do want to do, I'm just going to edit this, and on the linking tab, I'm going to change the entry position. I don't like how it's leading in behind where I can't see things, so I'm just going to stick it on the side. And now when I hit okay, I'm gonna get a nice visual of where that's gonna be able to lead in and lead out. I'll be able to see it while I'm looking through the window of the machine. I can take these two operations and copy them, and then I'll just right click and paste those back in. I'll edit this adaptive, throw away the chain and grab the new one that I want and hit okay. And that should give me the result I want because it's a direct copy. Edit the contour, do the same thing. I'm gonna click on this chain of geometry right there, and that's gonna give me the result I want. And then I'm gonna duplicate this one more time. So I'm just gonna say duplicate, and I'm gonna edit this. The reason I'm doing this is I'm gonna go to my geometry, throw that chain away. At this diameter, there's only a total of 1/8 of an inch difference between the stock and the diameter of the part. And if I divide that by 2 per side, that's a 1/16 of an inch. So I don't have a lot of material to take away here. I'm gonna go to my heights, and I'm gonna go minus 0.02 past the bottom. I'm gonna go 20 thousandths of an inch past. And then on the passes tab, I'm gonna turn on roughing passes, and I'm gonna set my tool step over. I'm gonna edit this expression. And then I just want the tool diameter here. And I'm gonna do times 0.15. So tool diameter times 0.15 is gonna be my step over, just like the adaptive. I'm gonna say I want 5 step overs, and then I'm gonna come up to my finishing step over and set this to be 0.01. Now I'm gonna hit okay, and you're gonna see that I get way more step overs than I need. I don't need it to take that many passes around the outside of it. So what I'm gonna do is just edit this. And if I go to my geometry tab and I enable stock contours, that'll keep the 2D contours from cutting outside of the stock. So when I hit okay, I should only get a couple passes around there. The reason I'm doing this is if I were to watch this 2D adaptive and this 2D contour, so let me just simulate that. What we'll see is the 2D adaptive is gonna play, and when it gets done, it's gonna retract all the way up to the clearance plane. And then it's gonna come in with the 2D contour, even though that's the plane it needed to be at. So it always goes back up to that clearance plane between operations. When I simulate this 2D contour, which is probably gonna throw out some errors on here, but so I've got a collision, that's fine. We can take care of that in a bit. What you'll see is this tool never retracts as it finishes this up. So I don't need that extra retraction until it's actually done. You can see I've got some issues on this though that we're gonna have to go and take care of. So never trust a simulation unless you're simulating the entire setup, but it doesn't look like this last 2D contour is doing very well. So if I hit the play button, I see that I've got a collision between the holder and the part itself. So that tells me I need to adjust the tool stick out. And if you remember on the softjaws, I was a little close for comfort. So what I'm gonna do is just go make a change to that tool. I'll right click on the tool and say edit tool. And then I'm gonna go to the cutter geometry. And for the length below holder, I'm going to change this to be 1.375 and see if that takes care of my issue. And I'll hit OK. Now I know I do have an 1.25 inch of cutting fluid on this tool. I should adjust that too, but I think I'll be okay. So you can see now all the tools that use, all the operations that use that tool now show up as being out of sync. So I'm just gonna click on the setups folder and say generate. And this might take just a second to go through. I'm generating everything. I really only need to generate the ones that have the red exclamation points, but I'll just do every operation instead. And now everything regenerates. I'll simulate that one more time and I'll go to my 2D contour, start from there. And then we'll just make sure we don't have any collisions at this point. We'll probably be close, but that's enough clearance. And I don't have any collisions, so everything is good to go. And that wraps up programming the top side of this operation. Now, for the back side, it's pretty much gonna be the same. So I'm just going to duplicate the entire setup. I'm gonna rename this to be rear gauge. Get rid of the 2 here. I'm gonna activate this setup. I'll expand this out and then I just start thinking about the operations that I need to do. If I edit this rear gauge setup, because I do have to make some changes to it. For the model, it's no longer gonna be the front body, it's gonna be the rear body. For the stock, it is going to be a fixed size cylinder and I'm going to leave this at the exact same size, even though it's not quite the same length. But this time, instead of having it centered, I'm gonna offset it from the back or the bottom, and I'm gonna offset that 0 amount. So all the stock is up there. That'll never hurt you. Won't be a big deal at all. On the post-process tab, I'm gonna set that to be a 2 instead of a 1. And then on the setup tab, again, I have to choose a different point for my work ordnance system, and I wanna make sure I choose the same one I chose when I cut the soft jaws in the back. So that's all good. So based on that now, what I can do is I can regenerate this first 3 adaptive. So I just hit Command G on my keyboard to take care of that. I can Command G that facing operation. And the reason it went to the wrong spot is because of the stock contours that I have turned on. So now I'm gonna select that and then just click on that face right there. And that will give me the facing operation that I want. And now I can just start editing my operation. So I'll edit this, go to my geometry, and I'm gonna click on this edge instead and hit OK. That'll clean that off to there. Go to my 2D contour, edit that, go to my geometry, click on the same edge again, hit OK. And I know all these operations are good because I just programmed them on the other side. I'm gonna edit this 2D adaptive, go down and select that chain and hit OK. And I'm gonna go to this 2D contour, edit it, go to that chain and hit OK. And now that I think about it, actually, I think I'm gonna grab a different one. I'm gonna delete this one off and I'm gonna use this last one. I'm gonna edit this, go to my geometry. I'm gonna grab this chain. I'm gonna set my stock contour equal to this instead. And now when I hit OK, those roughing passes, those extra roughing passes that I have will come into play. And then it will make sure it cleans up this entire flat and does the wall at the same time. So you can see there was a lot of reuse and repeat. Now I've got a little message here. Leading is dropped, so that won't be a big deal. You can see I just duplicated or reused a lot of the operations. If I go to my rear gauge just to do a simulation on this to make sure everything's all right, I'll hit play. Now my stock isn't gonna show up as perfect. You have to remember that there's no stock below one of the edges that I have selected. It shows that there's stock all the way down here, but that was all removed in the first setup. So there's the adaptive. Now the 2D contour is gonna come in and clean this up. It's gonna repeat the process again one more time for the next adaptive, go down and it's gonna clean out that material. And then the 2D contour is gonna start from the outside. It's gonna clean up the floor and do the finishing pass around the diameter. And you can see, good thing I simulated, I have an issue. You can see the gray of the part exposed through. And if you remember, I put a negative bottom height offset there. So that tells me I need to go and edit this 2D contour. I'm gonna go over to my heights tab and get rid of that negative 20,000ths of an inch. I'll hit OK. And then I'm gonna simulate that again just to make sure everything is okay. But I'm only gonna start from that last 2D contouring op. I'll hit play. That looks better this time. The only thing I'm gonna do is increase my roughing step over. I don't need it to be that small in this case. So let me just go edit that, go to the passes tab, and for a maximum step over, I'm gonna say 0.2, hit OK. That'll make that operation be a lot faster. So I'll simulate that one last time, starting from the 2D contour, maybe speed it up just a little bit. So there it goes through and cleans up does the contour pass and a repeat finishing pass. And the top side or the flip side, I should say, of this part is done. That completes all the tool pathing I need to do. I'm ready to post out my operations and go run out to the Silex 7 and run this part. So make sure you check in for the next video where you see if my tool paths worked out on the machine or not. As always, thanks for watching.